The last thing Derek Cole expected when he crash-landed on Veloris Prime was to be sniffed. Not scanned. Not interrogated. Not executed. Sniffed. Right on the ear. Now, before we get into how a 31-year-old cargo pilot from Toledo, Ohio ended up as the most wanted man, and simultaneously the most desired man, on a planet he couldn't even pronounce, let me back up. Derek Cole was, by most measures, unremarkable. He was the kind of guy who talked to his plants, named all three of them Gerald. He once cried watching a documentary about sea turtles. His co-workers at Helios Freight described him as, quote, "He's fine. He's just there." Derek had been assigned to Route 79er, a supply run from the Outer Rim to a colonial research station on the edge of Valorian space. Simple job. Boring job. Derek job. Except Route 79er passed directly through the Veth corridor. A stretch of space that even experienced pilots called the stretch where things go wrong. And things went wrong. A microasteroid, no bigger than a basketball, hit the fuel array. Derek had approximately 40 seconds to choose a crash site before his ship, the humble Gerald 3, yes, he named the ship after his plant, became a very expensive lawn ornament on an alien planet. He punched the emergency descent. He said one word as he hit atmosphere. Gerald. The humble Gerald 3 carved a trench through a silver-leafed forest and came to rest against a boulder the size of a house. Derek sat in the smoking wreckage for a full 2 minutes. Then he unbuckled, stood up, looked out the cracked viewport, and said, "Ha, purple trees." He was remarkably calm. This was, historians would later note, either evidence of extraordinary bravery, or evidence that Derek Cole had a remarkable gift for missing the severity of situations. He grabbed his emergency pack and stepped outside. The air smelled like cinnamon. The sky was the color of a bruise, deep violet with streaks of amber. The ground was carpeted in silver moss that glowed faintly when he stepped on it. He stood there, hand on his hip, and did what any reasonable man would do in an alien biosphere he'd never been trained to survive in. He said, "Okay, I'll figure it out." He did not figure it out. Within 6 minutes, Derek was completely lost. The silver trees all looked identical. His distress beacon was fried. His communicator was picking up what sounded like either alien wildlife or very avant-garde jazz. He sat on a glowing root to rest. And that is when he heard it. Not a roar. Not a growl. Not the sound of something about to eat him. A soft, deliberate padding. Feet on silver moss. Derek turned slowly. And there she was. She stood at the tree-line, tall, maybe 6'1", draped in something between armor and silk, the color of autumn leaves. Her skin was a warm amber. Her eyes were gold. Not brown gold. Not hazel gold. Gold. Like someone had poured sunlight into irises and forgotten to turn it off. She had ears. Not human ears. Fox ears. Pointed, tufted, and currently, both rotating toward him like satellite dishes locked onto a signal. She had a tail. Actually tail. Wide, amber and cream, swaying behind her with an authority that suggested they had opinions. She was, without any hyperbole, the most extraordinary thing Derek Cole had ever seen in his life. And she walked straight up to him, leaned in and sniffed him, right on the ear. Derek sat perfectly still. She pulled back, tilted her head, said something in a language that sounded like wind chimes made of brass. Derek blinked. "Hi," he said. Here is where Derek's one genuinely impressive quality saved his life. He was, by some miracle of Route 79er policy, carrying a Polylux Mark IV universal translator, a device roughly the size and shape of an earbud that could process and translate over 400 known alien languages. Could not, however, guarantee accuracy. The manual described it as, quote, contextually approximate, may convey general intent while dramatically misrepresenting specifics. In other words, it mostly worked. Mostly. Derek fumbled it into his ear. The fox woman said something else. Longer this time, with a sweep of her tail that seemed significant. The translator processed for 2 full seconds. Then it said, in Derek's ear, in flat American English, "You smell like confusion and something called a breakfast sandwich?" Derek looked at her. "That is accurate," he said. She blinked. Her ears flattened slightly. Then, and this was the thing Derek would replay for the rest of his life, one corner of her mouth curved. Just slightly, like she'd tried not to smile and hadn't entirely succeeded. She said something else. The translator said, "I am Sable. You are either very brave or very stupid." Derek considered this for a moment. "Those are not mutually exclusive," he said. Her second ear twitched. "That was Unbeknownst to Derek, the Velorian equivalent of a laugh. Sable of the Kethnari clan was not supposed to be alone in the Veth forest. She was the third daughter of High Warden Cashin, a title that roughly translated to the person in charge of making sure nothing from off-world touches anything on this world, which meant that Derek Cole, cargo pilot, Gerald Namer, Sea Turtle Crier, was currently the single most illegal thing on Veloris Prime. What Sable was doing alone in a restricted forest zone, without her honor guard, at the exact moment an alien crashed through the canopy. She would not explain. Not immediately, but she was also, Derek quickly noticed, bleeding. Her left side, beneath the armored silk. A dark stain spreading slowly. Derek noticed because Derek was the kind of person who noticed things like that. "You're hurt," he said. She straightened immediately, her tail stiffening. The translator gave him, "This is irrelevant. You must leave before the wardens find." And that's when the forest lit up. Searchlight drones. 6 of them. Cutting through the violet canopy in systematic sweeping arcs. And voices distant, but closing. Sable's gold eyes swept from the drones to Derek. And Derek did something that, again, historians would later point to as either genius or insanity. He grabbed her hand, nodded at the hollow of a massive silver root, and said, "Come on." They fit barely in the hollow of the root. This was a problem for several reasons. 1. Sable was a warrior caste Velorian with a tail, and a tail take up a meaningful amount of space. 2. Derek's emergency pack had a corner that kept jabbing Sable directly in the ribs. 3. The translator, this close, kept picking up Sable's breathing and rendering it as, "I am annoyed. I am extremely annoyed." The annoyance is architectural. The drones swept past. The voices faded. They stayed there for what felt like 10 minutes. In the dark, pressed shoulder to shoulder. Derek could feel, very clearly, that Sable's body temperature was about 4 degrees warmer than a human's. He could also feel, very clearly, that she was trying extremely hard not to let on that her side was hurting her. "I have a med kit," he whispered. She said something. The translator said, "No, that wound is going to get infected." She said something. The translator said, "You do not know Velorian biology." "I know infected," he said. A pause. Then, very quietly, "The kit." "Fine." Derek worked by the faint silver glow of the moss. Sable sat with the rigid dignity of someone who had decided that if she was going to allow she was going to allow it with maximum composure. Her tails disagreed. They kept curling closer to her body. A Velorian tail, Derek did not yet know, for discomfort. The wound was a blade cut. Recent. Not from the crash. "Someone did this to you?" Derek said. Not a question. Her ears went flat. "That is not your concern. I'm the one patching it, so I'm making it my concern." She turned and looked at him. Full gold gaze. 2 feet away in a dark root hollow. "You are a strange off-worlder," the translator offered. "I've been told," Derek said. He pressed the sealant strip carefully along the cut. "You'll feel a sting in 3, 2. She made a sound. A sharp inhale. Then immediately, complete stillness. Like she'd decided that having made the sound, the correct response was to pretend it hadn't happened. Derek very carefully did not comment on this. "Done," he said. "Clean. Should hold." Sable looked down at his work. Said something. The translator said, "Thank you." 3 beats of silence passed. "My name is Derek," he said. "I know." The translator gave him. "Your ship said it." Repeatedly. On the way down. Sable led Derek through the Veth forest because, as she explained with the energy of someone deeply inconvenienced, he would die within 40 minutes if she didn't. "The lumispores," the translator offered. "They bloom at dark cycle. Off-worlder lungs cannot filter them. You would be very decoratively dead." "Decoratively dead," Derek repeated. "You would glow. Quite brightly. At least there's an upside." Another ear twitch. Sable was doing that more often now. As they walked, Derek asked questions. He couldn't help it. Curiosity was, like Gerald naming and Sea Turtle crying, simply part of his architecture. Were there others like her? The Kethnari are 700,000 strong. Off-worlder. What was she doing alone in the restricted forest? A long pause. Then, running. He didn't push that one. Yet. Instead he said, "You speak my language." Through the translator. "But you understand the tone, right? Like, you knew I was joking about the glow thing." She was quiet for a moment. "Your face is very loud." the translator said. Derek laughed. Actually laughed. Startled, genuine. Sable stopped walking, turned, looked at him with something that wasn't quite confusion and wasn't quite wonder but lived somewhere between. Valorian men do not do that, the translator offered slowly. Not in front of others. It is considered a vulnerability. Laughing? Yes. Derek thought about this. On Earth, he said. Not laughing is what's considered the problem. Her tail rose very slightly. Sable's camp was a masterclass in what humans would describe as aggressively competent survival. A shelter woven from silver leaves, perfectly aerodynamic. Fire, using compressed mineral stones that burned hot but made no smoke. Provisions, dried Valorian marshroot, nutrient packs, a sealed water flask. Everything precise, everything prepared, everything alone. Derek looked around and noticed, with that loud face of his, that there was only bedding for one. You've been out here a while, he said. She didn't answer. Sable. For days, the translator said finally. For days. In a restricted forest zone. Alone. Injured. Running. You repeat information as if this changes it. No, he paused. Are you okay? She turned. And the look she gave him, gold eyes wide, ears mid-position, two of her tail curled inward, was the Valorian equivalent of a person who has not been asked that question in a very long time. No one asks a Kethnari that, the translator said softly. We are always okay. By definition. That sounds exhausting, Derek said. Silence. The mineral fire crackled. Then Sable sat down, cross-legged, and said something long. The translator took a moment. 3 days ago, High Counselor Veth, a man my father trusts, told me I was to be given to him as a political seal. Not married. Given. Like a signed document. I declined. With a knife. His knife. The one he tried to use on me first. And then I ran. Derek sat down across from her. Okay, he said. So we have something in common. What is that? We both ended up here because something went very wrong. Her tail uncurled. Just slightly. Yes, the translator said. I suppose that is correct. They spent the night at Sable's camp. This involved a series of negotiations that Derek would later describe as the strangest diplomacy I've ever conducted, and Sable would later decline to describe at all. Derek's emergency thermal blanket. Derek offered it. Sable refused it on principle. Then the temperature dropped 8 degrees and Sable accepted it. But she accepted it by simply relocating herself to where Derek had placed it, while maintaining full eye contact, daring him to comment. He did not comment. He considered this his finest hour. Derek had 3 ration bars. Sable had marshroot. They traded. Both immediately regretted it. This is textured, Derek said of the marshroot. Your food, Sable said of the ration bar. Tastes like something that was near food and absorbed the memory of it. Sable's camp had 1 sleeping mat. Derek had a folded emergency jacket. They agreed to a dividing line, marked by a stick Derek placed on the ground with great ceremony. At some point in the early hours, Derek woke up to find that both of them had migrated to the exact center of that stick line. He moved back quietly. She did not wake up. But her tail, and he would swear this in court, had wrapped approximate. 18 inches around his wrist. He stared at the ceiling of silver leaves for a long time. Gerald, he whispered to himself. You won't believe this. In the morning, Sable pretended the tail thing hadn't happened. Derek, with the emotional intelligence of a man who had spent 31 years reading when to push and when to let things be, also pretended the tail thing hadn't happened. They broke camp together. Efficiently. Derek folded the thermal blanket. Sable dismantled the leaf shelter, her movements precise, economic, beautiful in the way that very competent people are often beautiful, not performing, just functioning. Where are we going? Derek asked. I am going to the Kethnari Eastern Outpost. It is 2 days' walk. The wardens loyal to my father are stationed there. Not the ones Veth has turned. What about me? She stopped, considered him. Your ship can be repaired, the translator said. There is a parts cache at the outpost. Possibly. Possibly. Your alternative is to wait in the forest and glow beautifully when the spores come. Eastern Outpost it is. They walked. And because they were walking in the same direction, toward the same uncertain destination, they talked. Not carefully, the way people talk when they're protecting themselves. Just talked. Sable told him about the Kethnari. Fox kind? three-tailed warrior clans who had defended Veloris Prime's northern territories for 800 years. She told him about the Sky Festival. Once a year, when the amber moon passed closest to the planet, and every Valorian foxkind clan ran together across the silver plains under a sky on fire with reflected light. Derek told her about Earth, about Toledo, about Gerald, and the other Gerald, the ship. She found the naming of inanimate objects baffling and also, her tale betrayed, quietly delightful. He told her about his family, his mother, who still called him every Sunday on whatever comms channel he was currently reachable on, and always began with, "Derek, are you eating?" Sable was quiet for a moment. "My mother died," the translator said, "when I was 6 seasons. She was a scout. She did not come back from the Pale Reaches." "I'm sorry," Derek said. "It was long ago. Doesn't matter how long ago. It still lives in you." She stopped walking. Derek stopped, turned. Her ears were forward. Her tail was still. She was looking at him like he'd said something in perfect Kethnari without knowing it. "Yes," the translator said finally. "It does." They were one day out from the eastern outpost when High Counselor Veth's personal trackers found them. 4 of them, armed with pulse lances, Valorian weapons that made a sound like a wasp the size of a horse, and hit like one too. They came from 3 directions. Planned, efficient, a net. Sable went still, and in that stillness Derek felt something change in her. She wasn't scared. She was calculating. "How many can you fight?" he said quietly. "All 4, she said. "But not without them raising the alert first. What if they were distracted?" She looked at him. Derek stepped forward, into the open clearing, waved both arms, and shouted, in his clearest Toledo, Ohio voice, "Hey! Hi! Hello! I'm the off-worlder, the illegal one. I crashed. I'm very lost. Can someone please help me? I've been eating marshroot for 2 days, and I'm experiencing what I think is an existential crisis." All 4 trackers turned toward him, which meant none of them were watching Sable. She moved like amber lightning. First tracker down before he knew she was behind him, second disarmed and dropped in 4 seconds flat. Third caught a tail sweep to the knees and a follow-through elbow that even Derek felt sympathetic about. The fourth, the one who hadn't moved, who was still staring at Derek, finally raised his lance. Derek hit him with his emergency pack, which was, Derek would point out later, technically also a weapon. It had the corner. They ran, running in a silver forest at dusk, with spores beginning to drift through the canopy like tiny blue flames, was not in Derek's job description. He was breathing hard. Sable was not. This was humbling. She grabbed his wrist, not the pack corner side, and pulled him into a broken ravine, down a moss-slick incline, and through a gap in a stone shelf so narrow Derek had to turn sideways. They came out on the other side into a small hollow. A bowl in the rock open to the sky, the amber moon rising huge and close above them. Sable pressed her back to the stone. Listened. Derek pressed his back to the stone next to her. Also listened. He mostly heard his own heartbeat, which was doing something complicated. After a long moment, "They'll pull back," the translator said. "They won't come into the hollow. It's Kethnari sacred ground." "Oh good," Derek said. "Sacred ground. Got it." "You," Sable said, turning to look at him in the amber moonlight, "are the most unusual being I have encountered in 30 seasons. Is that good?" Derek asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she did something she had not done once in 2 days. She laughed. It sounded like wind chimes and a surprised fox kit, and Derek thought, in that amber moonlight in a sacred stone hollow on a planet he had absolutely no business being on, that it was the finest sound he'd ever heard. In the hollow under the amber moon, Sable asked him a question. "Why did you help me? When?" "Every time. The med kit, the hiding place, the distraction. You had no reason. I am not your clan, not your kind. You owe me nothing. You don't even know this world." Derek thought about this seriously. He wasn't the kind of person who performed depth. He just had it quietly, the way some people carry things without announcing them. "When I walked out of my ship," he said, "the first living thing on this planet walked up to me and, okay, yes, sniffed me but didn't hurt me. And then you were hurt, and I could fix it. So I did. And then you were running from something unfair, and I could help. So I did. That's it. I mean, you're also very..." He stopped. She tilted her head. "What?" "Nothing. Your face," she said, "is doing something. My face does that." "What were you going to say?" Derek looked at the amber moon. then at the silver moss, then at Sable, who was looking at him with those gold eyes, tail fanned behind her, the moonlight doing something unreasonable to all of it. "You are," he said carefully, "the most extraordinary person I have ever been in a root hollow with." She stared at him. "I've been in root hollows with like 3 people total," he added. But still, her ears rotated. Both of them. Forward, high, the Valorian sign, Derek did not know yet, for something landing softly in a chest that had been braced for a long time. In Kethnari culture, the translator said slowly, when a warrior tells another that they are extraordinary, specifically under the amber moon, in sacred ground, it is the first word of a claiming song. Derek froze. "I have not been claimed," Sable said carefully. "And you did not know that." "I absolutely did not know that. So it doesn't count, right?" "Correct. Doesn't count. A beat. Unless," she said, "you wished it to." Derek did not get to answer, because that is when the sky lit up. Not the moon, not the spores. A dropship, bearing the crest of High Counselor Veth, silver and black, the mark of his reformed warden guard. It was circling the hollow. They'd been tracked. Not by footprints, by Derek's translator. The Polylux Mark IV, it turned out, broadcast a faint locator signal on the rim frequency. Standard colonial policy. For rescue. Currently less useful for rescue, more useful for delivering Derek and Sable directly to the man who wanted Sable dead and probably didn't care much about what happened to Derek either. "I'm going to throw the translator away," Derek said. "It's too late," Sable said. "They have our position." She stood, pulled him up, and the look on her face, gold eyes hard, tail swept back, chin up, was someone who has spent 3 days running deciding, precisely, that she was done running. "The Eastern Outpost," she said. "We don't walk, we run. And if they land before we reach it, we fight. Together," Derek said. "You have the corner pack." Yes. They ran. Through the lumispores, Derek pulled his jacket over his face. Sable's tail swept the air ahead. Of her like she was born to move in forests, which, it turned out, she more or less was. The dropship found a clearing to land in. For more trackers deployed. It was, by any reasonable assessment, a situation Derek could not win. But here is the thing about Derek Cole. He was not fast. He was not a fighter. He was not trained for any of this. What he was stubborn. In the specific quiet way of a man who names his plants Gerald and patches strangers' wounds and doesn't let things go once he's decided they matter. And somewhere in the last 2 days, without much ceremony, Sable had become something that mattered. So he ran. And the outpost, lights on, gates open, 6 fully armed Kethnari warriors loyal to High Warden Cashin, with a 7th who turned out to be Sable's elder brother, Ran, who took one look at his little sister in one piece and went directly from relief to fury to directing people. The outpost was exactly where she said it would be. They made it through the gates 30 seconds before the trackers did. Run looked at the 4 trackers now standing at the outpost perimeter. He looked at Sable. He looked at Derek. He looked at the corner of Derek's pack. He looked at Derek again. "Is this the Offworlder?" the translator said. "Yes," Sable said. "He helped you. He was useful." Ren looked at Derek for a long, measured moment. "You hit someone with a bag," the translator said. "Emergency pack," Derek said. "It has a corner." Ren said something. The translator took a moment longer than usual. Then it said, "I like this one." High Counselor Veth arrived himself at dawn. Not with trackers, with a diplomatic protocol team because a Kethnari outpost was, technically, sovereign territory, and even Veth couldn't storm it without triggering clan war. He was tall, gray-furred, with the specifically careful smile of a person who has spent decades being dangerous quietly. He stood at the gate and spoke. The translator gave Derek, "Return the 3rd daughter. The Offworlder is an illegal entrant on Valorian soil. Neither of them need cause more trouble." Sable stood at the gate. She did not move. "You cut me," the translator gave, her voice flat and precise, "in my father's house, with my father's honor blade, because I would not sign a political bond one didn't choose. And you're standing at my brother's gate asking for calm." Veth said something that the translator rendered as, "What you want is irrelevant to what is needed." Derek stepped up beside her. He didn't have rank. He didn't have a weapon. He didn't have a single political credential on this planet. What he had was the Polylux Mark IV, which broadcast on the rim frequency. The same frequency monitored by the Colonial Observer Council, the interstellar neutral body that tracked incidents of off-worlder harm and rights violations on protected worlds. He'd been broadcasting since the Hollow. Everything Veth had just said at a sovereign outpost. Gate was now logged in 3 diplomatic archives. "Hi," Derek said into the translator, clearly and calmly. "My name is Derek Cole, Helios Freight, Route 79er. I've been on this planet for about 48 hours. I've personally witnessed an assassination attempt on the 3rd daughter of High Warden Cashin, committed by the man standing in front of me. I have logged this account on the Colonial Observer frequency. Hi to anyone listening." Veth went very still. Sable looked at Derek. "Your face," the translator said quietly, "is very loud." "Yeah," Derek said, "but this time on purpose." Veth did not storm the outpost. He withdrew, quietly, with the specific energy of a man rapidly reconsidering his choices in light of new diplomatic consequences. The Colonial Observer Council flagged the incident within 3 hours. High Warden Cashin, alerted by his son Ren, arrived at the outpost by midday. He was a larger man than Derek expected, older, with ears that had seen everything and eyes like hammered gold. He looked at his daughter for a long time, taking in the healed wound, the silver moss still on her boots, the fact that she was standing. He said something. She answered. Then he looked at Derek. "My daughter says you are strange," the translator said. "That's accurate," Derek said. "She says you argue with her." "Also accurate. She says you are not afraid of her." Derek considered this. "I'm a little afraid of her." "Good," the translator said. "Only fools are not a little afraid of her." He was quiet for a moment. Then, "What do you want for what you did for my daughter?" Derek looked at Cashin. Then at Sable, who was watching him with those gold eyes that gave nothing away except everything. "The parts to fix my ship," he said. "And maybe a few more days to make sure she's okay." Cashin looked at his daughter. Sable's 3 tails were perfectly, very carefully, very deliberately still. "A few days," Cashin said. "Maybe a week. A week. Possibly 2. Ren, standing behind his father, made a sound that was unmistakably a suppressed laugh. Derek stayed for 2 weeks. The parts for the humble Gerald 3 were provided. His beacon was repaired. His route log was filed with Colonial Observer. High Counselor Veth was brought before a warden tribunal, which is apparently a very bad place to be brought before. On the last night, Sable found him at the edge of the outpost, looking at the amber moon. She sat beside him, tail wrapped around herself in the cool air. "Your ship is ready," the translator said. "I know. You leave tomorrow." "I know." She was quiet for a moment. "I told my father," she said, "that under the amber moon, in sacred ground, you spoke the first word of a claiming song." Derek turned. "What did he say?" "He said it doesn't count unless it's finished." "And how does it finish?" She looked at him. Gold eyes. Amber moon. Tail move in. G slowly in a language he was just beginning to learn. "You come back," the translator said. Derek looked at the moon, at the silver forest, at Sable, who had run 4 days through a spore forest, fought 4 armed trackers, sat with him under sacred stone, and laughed like wind chimes in surprise, and had once, in a root hollow with complete dignity, pretended a tail hadn't wrapped around his wrist. He took out his Polylux Mark IV translator. He said, slowly and clearly, in what he hoped was the correct Kethnari phrasing that he had spent 3 days quietly asking Ran to teach him. "Sable of the Kethnari, you are extraordinary, and I am coming back." Her ears shot forward, her tail rose, and she smiled. Not the half-smile she couldn't stop, not the controlled curve. A real, full, luminous smile. In the amber moonlight, that Ren, watching from the outpost gate, would later describe as, "I've never seen my sister smile like that. I also may have cried. This information is not to leave this outpost." Derek grinned. "I'll be back by Thursday," he said. "We do not have Thursdays," the translator said. "You will," Derek said. "I'm naming one." Derek Cole left Veloris Prime the next morning. He filed his incident report, completed his route, called his mother, who said, "Derek, are you eating?" And he said, "Yes, Mom. Mostly," which was technically true if marshroute counts. He put in a formal application for a permanent Route 79er extension, an academic route stop, technically, for Colonial Observer purposes, on a planet called Veloris Prime. It was approved in 6 weeks. He went back, and on the night of the amber moon, 6 months later, under a sky the color of fire, Derek Cole and Sable of the Kethnari ran together across the silver plains with 700,000 foxkind, and she didn't let go of his wrist once.